everybody to this webinar that's co-hosted by the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance and American Rivers. My name is Scott Taylor, and I'm going to be one of your hosts today. I chair the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance. So our webinar today is about a piece that appeared in the opinion section of the Washington Post. It was on February 4th, and it was entitled, "Building a House, This Little Known Rule Could Cost You Thousands." It was put out by the Manhattan Institute, and we thought that it bared a little bit more discussion. Thought it was pretty one-sided in the way it was presented, and so that's what we're doing here today. Next slide, Seth. So here's our agenda. We're going to give you a little background on the opinion piece that was in the Washington Post, some of our reactions and responses to it, but really we're looking for your feedback. There's going to be an opportunity in this webinar to have some discussion. So we've assembled some experts here to discuss that, but that's a big part of this, is to really discuss this, and most importantly, I think, to see where do we go from here? What are the actions we can take moving forward in the future? So stay tuned. Seth's going to cover a little bit how all of that's going to happen right now. Seth is the executive director of NMSA, and I'll turn it over to him. Seth.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, just real quickly before we get going too far, just want to let folks know some logistics here. First of all, this is being recorded. This recording will be made available. We'll put this on our YouTube channel. It'll be available for free. We will send you a link to that in a email that'll come out in probably a couple days, a day or two after this is done. So if you want to share that with anyone, feel free to do so when you get that. There are handouts. There's called a handout part of your app that you're watching this through with the GoTo webinar app. There are two PDFs there. One is all these slides, and the other is the Manhattan Institute report that's behind, like Scott mentioned, behind the op-ed that we're talking about. There is 0.75 PDHs because we're going to go for 45 minutes today. So it's East Coast here for us, for me. So it's we're going to be going through 1:45 East Coast time. And you guys can make adjustments from where you are. If you've got questions, we'd love to have any questions anytime. Put them in the question part of the portal, and then I will be monitoring that, and we'll share that in the Q&A. We hope to get a lot of discussion here, so please don't hold back at all on that. And if you have any problems with the technological, like if you're having problems with hearing or whatever, put that in the chat function and send it just to me. So I do just to get things going here. Again, I'm Seth Brown, the Executive Director of the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance. Scott Taylor is our chair. Dave Smith is our emeritus member, and we have Gary Bellin here, who's the Director of the Clean Water Programs with American Rivers, our partner in this. And as Scott mentioned, we've got this opinion editorial or op-ed piece came out very recently, at February 4th, specifically the Washington Post. We can't share that with you, but we can share the Manhattan Institute report that's behind this, and that is that's in the handouts area. That gives you some context about why we're reacting to this, and we're going to hear more about this as we go along. Gary, you want to take it from here?
Sure. So thanks, Seth. And for those of you, again, I'm Gary Bellin, direct the National Clean Water Programs at American Rivers, and we're very focused on stormwater and wastewater infrastructure in terms of how it impacts rivers, and really want to laud the partnership we've had with National Municipal Stormwater Alliance and finding these consensus-based approaches to solving these problems. And so that's why this op-ed report was such an alarming occurrence for me, and Seth and I talking about how we deal with this and really looking at it. These types of communication techniques of putting out these reports that tend to be one-sided is a common occurrence, but it was a little bit of a surprise because as it is, we struggle with making sure that stormwater is well-funded and impactful and effective for communities. So this op-ed essentially was saying that federal stormwater regulations are a significant source of housing development costs, and that construction and post-construction related requirements should be relaxed in order to improve housing affordability. When we know really that some of these things were questionable. We know that construction costs are probably less than 15% I mean, stormwater costs are probably less than 15% of construction, and that our permits are very important to our river health, and how we message this is going to be important. Dave, you'd mentioned that you had a couple of thoughts on some more specifics about the report.
Well, thanks, Gary. I did review the Manhattan Institute report in some detail, and I think this is a general area where data and research is somewhat limited. And I think as a result, the report itself is pretty thinly researched. And I think it relies on some sources that are probably not that reliable. So I would suggest taking its claims kind of with a grain of salt. I do think that the report probably overstates the significance of stormwater compliance costs as a percentage of housing development costs. But I would say that, I think that it also understates the degree to which states have a lot of discretion in how they create stormwater permits and their associated requirements. I think it overstates the degree to which federal regulations guide the specific content of these permits. But as we'll discuss later, perceptions are important too. And so we'll talk about that perhaps some response to this is warranted given the perception that is expressed in the editorial and in the report. Back to you, Gary.
Thanks, Dave. So in response to this report and the op-ed, Seth and I, with representing the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance and American Rivers, submitted a rebuttal letter to the editor to the Washington Post. I don't think we've seen any response from them yet, Seth, in terms of whether or not they'll run the LTE. But what we basically said in there is that stormwater regulations are not actually a significant source of these price increases. It's, we think materials price increases due to tariffs, other land costs are much more significant cause of this, and stormwater is not what they're making it out to be. We also wanted to emphasize that why is stormwater management so important to communities? It's communities want clean water and safe and reliable housing to protect them from flooding and water pollution, and that the cost of reducing or eliminating the problems associated with stormwater management, if you don't do it, is even greater than if you don't put in the stormwater management in the first place. And so that is really why stormwater management has these large benefits that really support the community. And I think what Seth and I discovered in writing this LTE is really the importance of us thinking about communications as a sector and how we're effectively communicating more about why this is important to the community and how we can start to push back on these sorts of misconceptions that this report and op-ed put forward. I'll head over to Scott.
I think maybe it's this next one is mine, Gary.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dave.
Thanks, Gary. Well, as I mentioned, I think perceptions are important. And this is not the first time around the country that the concern has been raised in permit proceedings and in local stormwater management discussions about a concern about the cost of stormwater controls in related to the management of stormwater issues. And so since it has come up elsewhere and came up kind of prominently in this report and op-ed, we thought it would be useful to start talking with you about some actions to try to address this in a collegial and responsible way. I think we are interested in engaging with the development community to explore the issue further and identify areas where maybe we can agree to look into this further. That may include, further research and data collection to try to develop a better understanding about stormwater costs and benefits and how those fit into the housing development equation and development equation overall around the country. Meanwhile, I think that we have expressed interest in trying to improve stormwater permitting to ensure that it's done in a cost-effective way in different places, and So we've already been in conversation with EPA and some of the states about this, and kind of looking for opportunities to both improve cost effectiveness, but make sure that we realize the benefits that sound stormwater management can deliver for us. So, but one of the reasons we wanted to talk with you today is to start hearing back from you about what are you hearing about these issues, and what would you like to see done about it in the future to help us better understand the issues and improve how we communicate about stormwater management, its benefits, its costs, and how it fits into the broader context of urban management. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Scott.
All right, thanks, Seth. Next slide. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about communication. First, just take a quick step back. I mean, fundamentally, the purpose of stormwater management is to provide for the uses of stormwater, right? Specifically, and I think the most important to the public are domestic water supply, and then fishable and swimmable. And I don't think there's any rational debate that would say that those uses would be possible without MS4 stormwater programs. So to me, this op-ed really was a wake-up call. It was pointing out kind of a collective failure. We need to explain to the public much better how their money's being spent and how it protects these uses that I talked about of stormwater. So I think we need to do two things. The first one is we need more information on cost versus effectiveness of controls. And this is something that NMSA is investing a lot of time and energy in. We have a program called STEP, where we're looking at creating a verification service, an environmental technology verification service, looking at the effectiveness of BMPs. And this is going to allow us to select the most effective BMP, not only for reducing or removing pollution, but also in terms of cost. And I think that's something that's been kind of lacking up till now. Right now, we just kind of have this more is better approach where we add BMPs. I think you definitely see that in our permits, where our permits are now hundreds of pages long in some states, where we just keep adding to them rather than trying to improve the program overall. And I think secondly, the second thing we need to do is start showing some success stories. I mean, MS4 programs need things like public-facing dashboards that shows, tons of pollutants kept out of or removed from stormwater, water's taken off of TMDL lists. And again, these things need to be communicated, I think, consistently and correctly to the public, but we don't do that right now. Every program that has an MS4 permit should be letting the public know that we're stewards of the money we're spending and that we're winning this battle. And again, we don't do that. We implement this thing because it's a requirement, and we need to have this feedback to the public if we're going to expect the program to be funded. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Dave.
I think it's to me now, Scott.
Or to Gary. Yeah, sorry. we're a seamless.
Well, no, can we stay on that slide, Seth?
Yep, my bad.
Yeah, so just to build a little bit more on what Scott was saying in terms of communication, for all of you on this call now, you all are messengers, essentially, on this. We're all being tasked with how we respond to this, and you can't change the narrative or influence the narrative unless we have a big megaphone, and it's you all as part of this, you're the megaphone. And so one of the things that American Rivers and National Municipal Stormwater Alliance are trying to do together is build up more of this national messaging and communications. So we're doing this through the National Stormwater Leadership Coalition, which is bringing together not just American Rivers and National Municipal Stormwater Alliance, but a variety of other organizations across the stormwater sector, both NGOs, utility associations, municipal folks, to really pull us together as a sector and try and speak with a bigger megaphone, if you will, around some consensus approaches and reforms. And I think what's important is to know our audience with this. There's a couple different audiences we're trying to impact. There's the general public. There's our mayors or county leaders. You have state legislators that might be changing it. And so we have to address messaging in a way that responds to each of those different audiences and hear some things. But I think there's some basic messages that we can take away from this. And that's one, in the research that we've done in the polling and the message testing and American Rivers has done, we found that people respond really well to water, right? But it's very general notion and sense of water. So we need to remind people that all water is connected and pollution in rivers threatens our communities and drinking water. Stormwater is an essential public infrastructure. It's an essential service for our communities. It keeps our communities and our rivers safe and healthy. And always cite local examples of water solutions and those threats that they're solving whenever possible. And if we can highlight these messages in a way of unity, showing how we're working together, it transcends political party. Everyone relies on clean and safe, reliable drinking water, and we, as a stormwater sector, are a community pillar. Then that really, we find, has a big impact. And so what we're hoping through the National Stormwater Leadership Coalition and getting feedback from you is, do we need more messaging guidance like this? Do we need more toolkits, information? We think that we're hearing from some people that there is a need, and we'd like to hear more from you. If we, as a coalition, as a sector, pull together more of this information, is it something that you all would use? So we'd love to hear more about that. And so now we'll go to the next slide, Seth.
All right, Gary. Thanks. So at this point, we've given you some context on what's going on and some basic information. We know that you guys haven't had a chance to take a look at this information as of yet, unless you're familiar and you've seen this already. I'm talking about the op-ed and the report, which I think we want to raise awareness. That's really what we're trying to do here, so that people are aware of this. There has been a question that came in about asking if we can share that Washington Post op-ed. We cannot, because it's behind a paywall, and that's, you have to search for that. And I'm sorry that's the case, but that's just a limitation. I would say go to the report. The report is a lot more in detail on the same types of arguments, just to be clear. So I apologize for that. If you've got a Washington Post account, then you can go check that out. If you don't, then they'll make it available at some point potentially. Dave,
I'll just mention the executive summary to that report is short, and it tracks very closely with what the editorial says.
Yeah,
so that's a quick. That's a 1 minute read if you want to take a quick.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So, and that is available in the handouts. I'll also upload, or we'll share our letter to the editor too. I forgot to do that at this point. But so we've got a bunch of questions that came in, so we're going to go through them. We try to get through our upfront information as quickly as possible. We've got about 25 minutes for, or about 20-25 minutes for going through these questions, which is great. We know that this is just the start of this conversation, frankly. Also, we have set up, NMSA has set up at our website a portal to collect information. So if you go, there's a link that's shown there, and again, you'll get these slides. You can get them in the handouts. You'll get them later if you want them. With a link there, and it's anonymous, and it's just we've got, I think, 5 or 6 questions, something basic. It'll probably take you all of 5-10 minutes to go through. But what we want to get is information from the ground level. What is going on at the ground level in terms of housing and the potential tension between affordable housing or just housing stock and inventory and stormwater regulations. So if you feel free to provide the information, we'd love to do that. We want to collect more and more of that information so that we can really make sure that we're not asserting things that we're just asserting. We want to have some facts behind it. So anyway, with that being said, now on to the show. And there's a million questions. So I will start with the one that caught my eye, and then we'll go going through these as much as we can. Wow, so much are coming in that we keep some moving around. So I'm sorry, I can't. Some that are just comments too. I apologize that would come up here. See here. It says, is there research that has qualified the cost of negative externalities associated with development versus with and without stormwater regulations? So that's a question that came up. I know that there is. I've got some thoughts, but I want to ask you guys your thoughts about what are the costs of not having stormwater management, the adequate stormwater management versus having it. Any thoughts on that?
Well, Seth, I would just say I think this is also kind of a thinly researched area. Certainly, we're beginning to see more research that looks at the co-benefits of many stormwater management strategies in terms of reducing flood control risk, making stormwater available to augment limited water supplies, reducing urban heating issues and things like that. Most of the studies I've seen tend to be very local in scope, and I haven't seen a lot of research that rolls this up at larger scales. But I think that this is an area where there is some work that's been done out there, not very widely distributed. You know, a lot of these research articles just don't get read that much, and a lot of it has not been integrated at any kind of scale. So, you know, it may be that this is an area that warrants additional research investment if we can find a way to put the research funding together.
Yeah, I think that's a tough one. You know, what is something like if it hadn't been put in place? You know, you can't really define what that would look like. I think we all know, you know, the Cuyahoga River that caught on fire, you know, the basis for this Clean Water Act. And but you know, when I travel to other countries, I was not too long ago in China, for example, the water bodies in the urban areas are really polluted, and they're just now getting their, you know, their equivalent of their MS4 program up and running. I think, you know, India's another example of that. You see places, water bodies in urban areas that really are pretty toxic, and that's what it looks like without controls. So I think really the problem with this comes down to it's really difficult to monetize benefits a lot of time. That is the difficulty when everybody wants cost benefit analysis. Monetizing all of the benefits for not having pollution is difficult, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. And I think, as Dave and Gary have pointed out, we just need to invest more time and effort into doing that.
I want to make one other point, if I could, Scott, and that is in the Manhattan Institute report, it basically asserts that, well, rather than focusing so much on urban stormwater management strategies, we should be focusing on reducing agricultural pollution in rural areas, because I think that it's probably generally agreed that overall non-point source pollution is the biggest under controlled source of pollution in the country. But I have to note, first of all, as the report acknowledges, 80% of the nation's population lives in areas that are regulated under these stormwater permits. And in many of our major metropolitan areas, upstream agricultural sources are not the most significant source of local pollution problems and their impacts. So I think simply trying to tackle agricultural pollution in lieu of having strong stormwater controls is a strategy destined for failure.
Yeah, and I do know that there are some limited, you mentioned, Dave, there is some research that we need more research in this area, clearly. There is some limited information out there. ASCE has released information about the impacts, for instance, to infrastructure that gets impacted in stream corridors, right? So sewers oftentimes, or road crossings that are impacted through just erosion of headwater streams, especially. Those can be significant costs, and we do have information specifically on that based upon these reports, but that's just a small handful. I think we need more of this to make a stronger argument. So another question that came in was, do we have data on the percentage of stormwater management costs for the typical residential development? Scott, you want to?
Well, you know, I think that's a tough one, because the regulations vary by state, and it also the requirements then would vary by, you know, are you in a TMDL watershed, and how close are you to the receiving water body? You know, how good are your soils? It's so variable, but I think this is a really interesting question, and we wanted to address that as NMSA. So that's one of the questions that we've put into the stormwater housing survey that we have up on the website. We'd really like, you know, from your perspective, your state, we're interested in getting what are the range of costs and things for stormwater controls, and really trying to at least have a general assessment nationwide of what that is, because I think people are just opining on that. And I think that you can take your experience from your local area, but it doesn't translate well across the US because there's so many variables.
Yep. Dave or Gary, do you have anything to add to that one? No, nothing else to add. Okay. Okay, some other questions that are coming in here. Says that the op-ed claim that the stormwater runoff is not a significant cause of water pollution. What is a quick data point on that that we can use to refute that? Gary, I know you've thought about this quite a bit, so I've got some thoughts too. But Gary, why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, I mean, we clearly know the high level stuff is stormwater is quickly outpacing sewage in terms of source of water pollution impairment. I've seen studies that show that stormwater in some places can be up to 50% of the bacterial loads in some of these cities. And not to mention the fact that it's the primary transport of trash and plastics in many of these cases. And not an insignificant phosphorus and nitrogen load, depending on where you are. So, I mean, it's clearly, to me, it's the largest and quickest growing source of water pollution in the country. That's the high level point. And I think that's something that we need to do more talking points on, give some of you all some of those like specific details. Dave, I saw you shaking your head. You had some other thoughts, I think.
Well, I mean, I think that the data on this are not as comprehensive as we'd like, given Scott's point about the variability in stormwater issues around the country and stormwater controls around the country. But I mean, the bottom line is I do think that there is at least significant evidence that urban stormwater pollution is a much more significant source of pollutants than the Manhattan Institute study suggests. And I will tell you, as a former EPA employee, EPA's data on this are not all that easy to navigate. And so I think there's room for maybe better analysis of data we're already collecting to better answer the question that the questioner raises.
Yeah, and I also think that the question should be, I think, placed in the context of pollution impacting communities, right? So yeah, obviously agriculture is a huge polluter, right? Well, there's not as many people there, right? So we are polluting the areas and the communities in which we live. Also, if the author wants to make the case that we should start regulating agriculture for water quality, that's a whole nother topic to cover, right? So I think that that's where I come out on some of this too. So Scott, do you have anything else to add on this point?
Well, I think if you want to get kind of a snapshot of where we are in the US, take a look at the EPA's webpage and look at the TMDL impaired waters map. Again, the whole point of the Clean Water Act is fishable and swimmable, and that map shows where we are falling short of those goals across the US on a state-by-state basis.
So we actually, that's a great point, Scott. We've been at American Rivers doing some GIS analysis, and from at least on the information that EPA is able to provide, the data there, we're finding about 76% of urban streams are not meeting designated uses, or 76% upstream miles, I should say. So, and so the guess is the overwhelming cause of this is stormwater and sewage, and I think we need to figure out, because the data is not clear in terms of some of the sources, like what that divide is between stormwater and sewage. But it's a significant source. We know that this is more than half, I think, of those impairments.
And Gary, are you talking, when you say stream miles, are you talking about even headwater small streams, or are you talking about major rivers, just to clarify?
I'm talking, yeah, even small streams that are within the urbanized areas as defined for MS4. Okay. So 76%. So if you're talking about the entire country,
76% of urban streams is what you're saying.
Yeah,
right?
76% of urban streams are not meeting attainment. All right, they are too polluted to meet designated uses.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, another question that came in, I think that was good, is What do you think about the lack of watershed scale long-term monitoring to demonstrate the effectiveness of stormwater control measures? Any thoughts on monitoring and whatnot in this context?
Well, I have to say, Seth, as I think y'all know, monitoring stormwater is difficult because it is episodic, and the amount of pollutants that it carries varies depending on how long it was since the last storm, that kind of thing. So I think that traditional monitoring approaches that have been used in a lot of the country in how we monitor water quality trends are kind of ill-suited to studying the phenomenon of stormwater pollution and how it does its work. That said, I mean, we've realized this for a while, and there has been some increase in the use of different kinds of monitoring methods to better capture the shape of stormwater pollution over storms, over individual storms, and over a course of storms through a rainy season, or through the course of the year. Unfortunately, investment in monitoring and water quality trend monitoring overall has been under severe pressure in most states, and it seems to be going down, not up. I do think that there is room for, and this is something NMSA and American Rivers have been thinking about, is to, let's think about revamping how we do monitoring so that it is better at answering these kinds of management questions, and sort of really helping us answer the question about, are we being effective and are we being cost effective in where we're investing in these kinds of controls. It's just been a little bit slow to change habits and how monitoring dollars are spent across the country. And I think that's a good conversation to be having overall, housing issues aside.
Yeah, Dave, I could go on all day as about monitoring, but you say we've been slow to change. I would say we're calcified. The monitoring really hasn't changed since the permits were written, and we've got drawers full of data on mass emissions. I can tell you almost to 5 milligrams per liter what TSS is going to be coming off an urban parking lot, and we don't need to be repeating that, year after year. We should be looking at the things in the receiving waters that are important to us. Are we having problems treating water for domestic supply, for example? These emerging contaminants that are coming in, like, pick any of them lately, and are they showing up in our drinking water, and do we have to treat for those? That's a tough one. Sanitary qualities we already talked about, eutrophication, bioaccumulation, toxicity. These are things that we don't really test for, but we just have this kind of laundry list of 30 or 40 indicators or chemicals that we test for, that we know what's in there. So yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I was involved in a study back around in the early 2000s where we had some license on a roadway, a freeway actually, to put together a monitoring program. And we said, well, why don't we just test for platinum and palladium? Because we know that those are used in catalytic converters of cars. And we did, and we got measurable quantities of both platinum and palladium in the runoff. But when you get, at least then, when we went to what was then the gold book for EPA, there was no standard for platinum and palladium. There was no estimate of what the toxicity of those metals would be because the research hadn't been done. And that's not, that's just pointing out that we don't know what's in stormwater, and there's hundreds of thousands of chemicals in commercial use, and we don't test for them all, and we don't know the synergies. And so the monitoring program does need, in my opinion, to be seriously revamped and start looking more towards the receiving water instead of just testing for this list of chemicals that we've been testing for 30 years.
So I have mixed thoughts on, Scott and I have talked about this a little bit in terms of, but I do agree with, we need the monitoring to tell a story, right? The people, the general public aren't going to get on board with supporting sound stormwater management unless they understand how it has an impact on their local stream, right? So the messaging is really, the monitoring is really important in terms of like, what's the overall impact on water or river health, right? And is my river, or is my stream safe to touch, right? And so when we're talking about monitoring, sometimes we get into these, to your point, Scott, like nitty-gritty details, and some of that is important for certain areas of concern, but we also need to think about like how are we making general improvement to the river, and how are we telling that story? And we need to be thinking about monitoring so we can do that. And I think that's where there's some conversation to how we do that better. Because honestly, water quality data in this country is pretty poor in general.
I think water in general is pretty data poor, but in that context, we're even the poorest of the poor. I think in that of the whole water sector. I think that, and because of what you said, Dave, it's just hard. It's not easy to do. So we need to be thoughtful about when we're collecting data, right? That we're going to expend those investments with some kind of intent, right?
The good news is we have developed new methods, real-time monitoring methods and things like that, the use of modeling to help us fill in gaps and to help sort of project the future, to estimate the effectiveness of the use of BMPs across a watershed, those kinds of things, and others that I think complement traditional monitoring methods and help us do more of this kind of effectiveness assessment that we're talking about.
Yeah, that ties. Oh, I'm sorry, Darren, go ahead.
Cost over time.
Yeah, no, and I apologize for trying to cut you off there. I didn't mean to. But that goes, I think, Gary, you were telling me about that there's new technology that can use satellite imagery to estimate turbidity levels as an example. That could be, and there's a lot of proxies. Now there's a lot of errors in there, but we're finding remote sensing ways to collect some of this data. I think that ties into a larger discussion about cost effectiveness of stormwater in general, right? And we are working as an organization to try to find ways to harness these technologies and revisit the MS4 permit program overall to find cost effectiveness. And that's, again, we're just at the start of that journey, and that's part of the National Stormwater Leadership effort too. So there's clearly more that we can be doing, but we're going down that pathway. We do need to be more cost effective, and we are doing that. So I just think that that's something that we shouldn't blow past that point. Gary, you got something there?
I was just gonna say, and those technologies that you're referencing, Seth, the costs are coming down.
Yes.
Right. And I think we're on the cusp of a revolution for water quality monitoring technology, and both from satellite data, from new sensors, and I think we need to be on that wave as a stormwater sector. How do we, to Scott's point, how do we make the monitoring more effective and less costly and more streamlined to both make stormwater management easier and also to have improved impacts for river and community health?
Yeah, that's all right. I want to pivot a little bit here to talk about messaging. There was a question that came in from Sally that was a great question, or really more of a point. That's basically said, that she said, I work in development review for local government. In her community, they consider both peak discharge and water quality parameters, right? And water quality treatment. Editorial did not distinguish between these two. So moving forward, we really need to be, as a sector, talking about both quantity and quality in our messaging. So, I mean, that's a great point. I didn't know whether, Scott, I know you got some thoughts specifically on messaging. I didn't know whether you want to jump on that or add to that or whatnot.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. And again, the problem with some of this, the messaging is tough. We need a messaging expert because, it gets really wonky really quickly. When you start talking about the quantity, one of the big problems is that you start changing the sediment transport of the stream, and that has all kinds of effects then on the health of the stream, the habitat quality and everything. But, people's eyes start glazing over about 4 seconds into that conversation. So we need to be able to describe that in a way that makes sense to people and say, hey, look, the stream's going to erode and start taking away private property if we don't manage this aspect of stormwater and manage how sediment is both taken out and put back into water. So that's difficult. And again, we've tended not to have the difficult conversations and attack these difficult problems, but I completely agree with the commenter that it needs to happen and it needs to be effective in how we do it.
Well, I'd add this point, Scott, if I could, Gary. And it's just that, first, I want to emphasize that people who work on stormwater also get that developing more housing is important. And I don't want to create a perception that it's sort of stormwater above all and that we don't care about other values in making our communities better. But I'll make the observation, and the comment you mentioned, Seth, got me thinking about this, that at the local level, we tend to have very siloed programs, and the folks who work on plan review and housing, development reviews, zoning, local planning, that kind of thing, tend to be quite isolated from those who are working on stormwater management, other water utility management. And so I think that there's a huge amount of room for sort of cross training and communication to help local government people work better with each other to kind of harmonize their goals and to look for ways to do so more efficiently. Because I mean, I hear it because I talk a lot to people who work in the housing sector, and that sometimes it's just institutionally they're a little bit at odds with each other. And I think in large part that's because we haven't taken the trouble to try to educate each other about sort of the other party's goals and their problems, and to find ways to kind of work better together to address these things.
And I was just going to say, Seth, and to Scott's point about communication, that's why the audience and knowing the audience is so important, because the way you might talk about the difference between volume versus quantity versus quality to the local public is going to be very different than you might go talk to your mayor or how the state legislature is going to take it up. So in some cases, you may need to be a little wonkier depending on who you're talking to, but other cases you need to be zoomed way out. And so I think it's going to be important for us to be able to define who are the audiences we're talking to and what is that message to make those definitions for each audience.
Yeah, there's a ton of questions that we could not get to, and I'm sorry about that, but it goes to show that there's a lot of interest. There were 230 people showed up, 215 are still here, so clearly there's a lot of interest, and I think this is just the start of this conversation for us. We could talk about incentives, we could talk about permit or plan review dynamics. There's a lot to talk about, so I think we're going to be doing more in this area. I did want to mention that for us to be able to do this for American Rivers with Gary and NMSA with the rest of us, we need your support. And I know there's been some questions about how do we get involved with NMSA. Go to our website, ms4nmsa.org. You can go there and get more information. If you want to become a member, you can go there too. There's information about how to donate to American Rivers as well. And we're working together on this National Stormwater Leadership Coalition. We're just starting that out. So I know there have been some questions about that. We will get more information out to the world on that too. So we're starting a lot of these things right now. Just because we don't have a lot to say right now doesn't mean there's not a lot to be said. It's just a lot of it's being developed right now and in the near future. So Scott, as we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts before we got a couple more minutes here? I don't know if you have any, or maybe we can go round robin real quickly. How's that? So we can do like 30-second. Dave, you want to kick things off?
Sure, 30 seconds. We need to hear from you. We really are interested in hearing about specific local situations where maybe this dynamic between, perceived stormwater compliance costs and its impact on housing or development. We'd like to hear about specific examples where that's come up and how it's been handled. That's going to really help us get a sense of, what's the shape of this issue around the country. So I commend you to go to the survey that Seth mentioned and fill it out. And second, tell us what you want us to do, because we are going to do more on this, but we'd like to be responsive to the kinds of help that you think would be actually helpful in addressing this.
Hey, Gary, any last thoughts here?
Yeah, so 100% what Dave just said, we need to hear from you. If you're going to go out and communicate, simple, clean water, everybody loves clean water. Stormwater is essential public community service to provide healthy water for our rivers and our communities. That's the high level message. And when we hear back from you, do you want more, do you need more of these sorts of messaging and communication tools? We'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I'll add just real quickly, I know we're at time, that someone asked about talking points. We have developed talking points. We'll be getting that out to everybody. We'll have that as a resource on our website. I'm sure American Rivers as well. My information, our contact information is going to be in emails at following up. So if you have any questions for any of us, you'll have a chance to do so. And again, you'll get a recording of this. And Scott, you're the last word here.
All right. Well, in stormwater, we've historically done a really crummy job at PR, but I'm here to tell you right now that NMSA and American Rivers are going to change that. So we're moving forward, and we appreciate your help, and we appreciate you attending the webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks.